It was 2:14 a.m. when I saw her again, bathed in the soft glow of my porch light, crouched like a raccoon in flip-flops and a leopard print robe. Her platinum curls bounced with each suspicious glance she cast toward my window. In one hand rested a glittery pink power strip. In the other, the thick orange extension cord of her tricked-out ATV. She plugged it into my outdoor socket like she owned the grid, then strutted off humming, "I'm too sexy," like this was just another Tuesday. I watched, slack-jawed, from the upstairs window, clutching a bowl of cereal that had long gone soggy. There it was, cold, hard-proof. My neighbor Karen was stealing my electricity to charge her bejeweled suburban war chariot in the dead of night. And this wasn't the first time. No, this was the fourth, but it would be the last. You see, it all started when I noticed my electricity bill had ballooned by nearly $150. I live alone. No kids, no parties, no floodlights for crop circles. Just me, my dog Rufus, and a modest two-bedroom with exactly zero high-voltage secrets. At first, I thought maybe the HVAC was overworking, or maybe the water heater was on the fritz, but the numbers just didn't add up. Then, during a casual chat over the fence, my other neighbor George jokingly said, "You might want to watch out. Karen's been borrowing more than just sugar lately." I laughed until I didn't. Curiosity turned into paranoia. Paranoia turned into investigation. That's when I bought the cheapest Wi-Fi security cam I could find online. I named it Sparky and pointed it directly at the suspiciously accessible outdoor socket. 3 days later, Karen walked straight into the shot like she was starring in her own reality show. She didn't even look around, just plugged in her glitzy ATV with practiced ease, smacked her gum, and walked off like she just paid rent on my house. She left the cable draped over my begonias like a charging umbilical cord and came back 4 hours later with a Frappuccino in one hand and a Bluetooth speaker in the other. When I confronted her, politely might I add, she had the audacity to laugh. "Sweetie, maybe your wiring's just haunted or something. You ever think of that?" she said with a smirk that could crack marble. I showed her the footage. She squinted like she couldn't see it, muttered something about deep fakes, and then waddled back across the lawn, muttering about calling her cousin in IT. She never denied it. She just rewrote reality. That's Karen's specialty. She's a master illusionist with the ego of a Kardashian and the morals of a cartoon villain. The next morning, someone had stuffed my mailbox with used ATV brochures and a note that read, "Maybe you should upgrade, Gramps." It was written in pink glitter pen and smelled faintly of tanning lotion. I wasn't even mad. I was impressed, but also very, very done. I considered my options. Report her? The HOA is a joke, and the local cops already know her by name thanks to her weekly complaints about illegal wind chimes and a suspiciously tan mail carrier. Confront her again? She'd just twist it into another game of emotional dodgeball and paint me as the paranoid loner who hates joy. Ignore it? Well, I could, but then she wins. And Karen, she never just wins quietly. She celebrates loudly, with EDM remixes of 90s girl groups blasting from the ATV speakers at 7 a.m. on Sundays. So, I started planning. Not revenge, justice. Elegant, poetic justice. But first, I had to understand the enemy. That's when I took a walk around the neighborhood and discovered something alarming. Karen's ATV wasn't just a hobby. It was her status symbol. This thing had underglow, flame decals, and a customized plate that read Queen K. It had Bluetooth for cup holders and what I'm 90% sure was a backup camera. And it was always charged. No visible solar panels, no power cords at her house. When I peeked into her garage one night while walking Rufus, I saw it. A tangled mess of extension cords, surge protectors, and splitter cables coiled like a nest of electric vipers. She had been leeching power from multiple houses, like a low-tech vampire with a Costco membership. But I wasn't just going to pull the plug. Oh no, that would make me no better than her. I needed something that sent a message, something that didn't just stop her, but made her think twice before ever targeting someone else's outlet again. I didn't want justice through violence. I wanted psychological fireworks. I wanted her to plug in and regret it in high definition. So, I called my cousin Tom, who works in props and special effects for local theater. Ever build a glitter cannon triggered by motion sensors? I asked. He laughed. You're finally asking the right questions. The stage was set, the trap was baited, and Karen, she was about to learn that the real power in the neighborhood didn't come from a socket. It came from strategy, patience, and a tiny camera named Sparky. Karen didn't show up the next night. At first, I thought maybe she'd figured it out. Maybe she'd finally seen the writing on the wall, or better yet, the camera footage I'd shown her. But then I remembered who I was dealing with. Karen doesn't back off. She recalibrates. She retreats like a cartoon villain only to come back with a bigger plan and worse intentions. I knew it was only a matter of time. And I was right. 2 days later, I woke up to the sound of an engine revving outside my house. I scrambled to the window, already dreading what I'd see. And there she was, Karen, in all her glory, perched on her now neon green ATV, wearing oversized sunglasses and a hoodie that read "Let the Queen Charge." She wasn't even pretending anymore. She looked up at my window, smiled, and slowly plugged her orange cord into my outlet like she was lighting the Olympic torch. Rufus barked. I just stood there, mouth open, watching the most audacious woman in the world treat my property like her personal power station. I stormed outside, trying to keep my cool. "Karen, I thought we talked about this," I said, gesturing toward the cord. She looked at me, expressionless, and said, "I thought about it too." She paused, and I decided I don't care. I unplugged the cord. She plugged it back in. We did this 3 times, like some sort of passive-aggressive tango, until she finally said, "You don't even use this outlet. It's basically abandoned," she added under her breath, "like your social life." Then she revved her engine and sped off in reverse, spraying gravel all over my driveway. I spent the next 2 hours pacing the living room, drinking lukewarm coffee, and muttering to myself like a man on the brink. This wasn't just about electricity anymore. This was about principle, about boundaries, about the simple fact that if you let a Karen walk over you once, she'll turn your entire life into a red carpet. And so, I decided to take action. First, I removed the outlet entirely, cut the power at the breaker, capped the wires, and installed a blank faceplate over it. It was dead, gone, no more easy access. That night, Karen returned, as I knew she would. I watched from the shadows as she stomped across my lawn with her power strip in hand. She got to the wall, bent down, and froze. Confusion, then irritation, then the slow, simmering anger of someone realizing their free buffet has closed. She stomped back to her ATV, then stood there for a solid minute, just staring at my house like she was trying to set it on fire with her thoughts. I smiled. It felt like a win. Until the next morning. My front tires were slashed. Clean, precise cuts, too clean for an accident, too deliberate to ignore. No note, no witnesses, but I knew. Everyone knew. Karen doesn't just retaliate. She escalates. I reported it, of course, filed a police report, took photos, the whole 9 yards. But without proof, there was nothing they could do. The officer, trying not to laugh, even said, "You think she did it because you unplugged her ATV?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The whole neighborhood knew what was happening. They just didn't want to get involved. Karen had them scared. She was the HOA's worst nightmare. A Karen with time, resources, and an unlimited sense of entitlement. So, I changed tactics. I needed to fight her with her own weapons. Drama, spectacle, and pettiness. I reached out to Tom again and asked if he could help me rig a harmless trap, something theatrical but safe. He was thrilled. The man lives for this kind of thing. He showed up that weekend with a contraption that looked like it came out of a magician's trunk, a hollowed-out outlet plate rigged with a glitter bomb, set to trigger if someone plugged into a dummy socket. We tested it twice on a lawn chair. The results were spectacular. The chair is still sparkling to this day. I installed it late Sunday night, knowing Karen would try again soon. Sure enough, Monday morning at precisely 6:37 a.m., I was awakened by the sound of a muffled pop followed by a scream that started high and ended in something resembling a banshee gargling soda. I raced to the window just in time to see Karen sprinting across her yard, covered head to toe in shimmering rainbow glitter. Her robe had absorbed most of it, but her face sparkled like a disco ball, and her hair was now streaked with metallic pink and blue. Rufus barked like he'd just witnessed divine intervention. Karen screamed my name. Not yelled, screamed, like I had summoned demons into her soul. She stormed to my front door, pounding with the fury of 1,000 glitter-covered suns. I didn't answer. I simply sipped my coffee and watched her from the peephole. After a minute, she gave up, muttered something about calling Channel 7, and stomped back home, leaving a glitter trail behind her like some sort of deranged suburban fairy. Later that day, she posted in the neighborhood Facebook group, "Warning, someone is installing dangerous devices on their property. My rights have been violated. I could have been blinded. Responses varied from cautious emojis to outright laughter. George replied with a meme of a raccoon wearing sunglasses. Someone else posted, "Maybe you shouldn't be on other people's property at 6 a.m.? The tide was turning. Karen was losing her grip, but she wasn't done, not even close. That evening, as I watered the lawn, Karen drove by slowly, her ATV now spotless again, music blasting from her mounted speakers. She didn't look at me, but I saw her smirk, and I knew that whatever was coming next, it wasn't going to be subtle. The power war had officially begun. Only now, it wasn't about energy anymore. It was about control, territory, the right to not have your home turned into a charging station for a suburban war machine. I was no longer just a guy trying to protect his electricity. I was a man defending his honor, his property, and his lawn from a woman who treated boundaries like suggestions and rules like dares. So, I went inside, pulled out a notebook, and began drawing up plans. Karen wanted a war. Fine, but I was going to make sure this one ended with fireworks. 2 days passed without a single Karen sighting. No ATV, no glitter, no power cords sneakily slithering across my yard like electric snakes. It was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like the universe is holding its breath. Rufus didn't bark once, which was unnerving in itself. I began to feel a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. Had she finally given up? Had the glitter bomb, the Facebook backlash, and the dead outlet pushed her into hibernation? It felt like the storm had passed, but only because it was gearing up for a Category 5. That night, at exactly 2:46 a.m., I found out how wrong I was. I was jolted awake by the loudest, most obnoxious bass drop I'd ever heard. My walls were literally vibrating. I ran to the window and was greeted by the sight of Karen circling my driveway on her ATV like she was in some deranged ritual. Neon lights blinked from under the vehicle, shooting colors across my house like a disco gun gone rogue. Her speakers were blaring a dubstep remix of Barbie Girl, and she had a megaphone in hand. Every few seconds, she'd shout, "Power to the Queen," before revving the engine so hard I thought it might explode. Rufus barked like he was about to join the SWAT team. I rushed outside in my pajamas, waving my arms like an angry flag. "Karen, what are you doing?" She slowed her ATV just enough to meet my eyes, her face glowing pink from the lights. "Just exercising my right to enjoy the neighborhood, sweetie," she said sweetly, then peeled out with a screech that left black marks on my driveway. The next morning, my lawn had fresh tire tracks, my mailbox was tilted at a suspicious angle, and someone had zip-tied a glittery sign to my porch that read, "Energy Hoarder." I took it down, but the message was clear. Karen wasn't just retaliating. She was declaring war, and she wasn't playing fair. I knew I had to fight smarter. If she was going full chaos, I had to go full strategy. So, I reached out to George. Turns out, he'd been watching from his living room during the ATV rave and had it all on video. Even better, he wasn't the only one. By noon, 4 neighbors had messaged me their own footage, offering to help if things escalated. That's when I realized something important. Karen hadn't just made me her target. She'd made enemies out of half the block. It was time to turn this one-man defense into a neighborhood alliance. We met at George's garage that evening. Present were George, his wife, Linda, an older guy named Walt, who used to work for the city utilities department, and a woman named Grandma D, who looked like she could bench press a bike and had a tattoo that read "Born to Fry." We formed a plan, or more accurately, we started collecting evidence, surveillance, documentation, even timestamps of when her ATV passed certain points on the street. Grandma D brought out what she called the folder, which was packed with years of minor infractions by Karen, from noise complaints to photos of her dog pooping on other people's lawns. Turns out, Karen had been low-level terrorizing this neighborhood for a long time. She'd filed complaints against Halloween decorations she didn't like, accused teenagers of suspicious lemonade sales, and once called animal control on someone's garden gnome because she thought it was staring at her bedroom window. Everyone had a story. No one had ever fought back. Until now. We decided to install more cameras, higher quality, wider range, and hidden in everything from birdhouses to fake sprinkler heads. Walt took the lead on the technical setup, while Linda drafted a letter to the HOA citing repeated harassment and violations. But I wasn't satisfied with just paperwork. I wanted to hit Karen where it hurt, her image. So, I built a website, nothing fancy, just a private portal for our street. We called it Power Watch. Neighbors could log incidents, upload footage, and report sightings of suspicious extension cords. It was a hit. Within 48 hours, we had 27 entries. My favorite was from a guy 2 houses down who claimed Karen had tried to charge her ATV using his backyard Christmas lights in March. As the data piled up, so did the patterns. Karen wasn't just stealing power from me. She'd been siphoning electricity from at least 6 homes over the past few months. Different cords, different outlets, different times of day. She was basically running a covert charging network. That's when I realized this wasn't just about inconvenience. Karen was committing theft, repeatedly, systematically. With evidence in hand, we were finally ready to go to the HOA and possibly the police. But before we could file anything, Karen struck again. This time, it wasn't noise or glitter. It was something far more personal. I came home from work to find my backyard completely trashed. My patio furniture had been flipped, my grill was missing its knobs, my hose had been cut in half and tied in a knot around the garden gnome, and worst of all, someone had dug up my prized tomato plants and replaced them with cheap plastic roses. A sign stuck in the dirt read, "Fake garden for a fake victim." My jaw clenched so hard I thought I might crack a molar. I checked the camera footage. Sure enough, around noon, Karen had strutted into my backyard, ATV idling at the curb, wearing gloves, and carrying a shovel like she was about to plant a victory flag. She was laughing, singing, treating my home like a stage. She even posed for a selfie with my broken hose. It was the final straw. That night, we called an emergency meeting at George's. Everyone came, even the quiet neighbors who usually kept their blinds closed. There was rage, laughter, a few tears, but mostly there was determination. We weren't going to let one glitter-covered tyrant run our neighborhood into the ground. Karen thought this was just a game, a battle of wills between her and the weird guy with a camera. But now, she was facing a movement, a collective, a resistance powered by good old-fashioned neighborly justice. She may have thought she had the power, but what she didn't know was that the real electricity in this street came from unity, strategy, and one very angry retired Navy electrician named Grandma D. Karen had made her last mistake. That backyard stunt wasn't just petty, it was personal. Tearing up my garden, mocking me with plastic roses, and turning my sanctuary into a chaotic mess had crossed every invisible line. If this were a game, she just handed me the final puzzle piece. No more warnings, no more glitter. It was time for the endgame. And this time, I wasn't going in alone. The neighborhood was awake now, awake and furious. George offered to loan me his old surveillance drone. Walt brought over schematics of Karen's property from when he used to work city planning. Linda had filed the HOA complaint with all the neighbors' signatures. And then there was Grandma D, who sat in my living room eating hard candy and sketching something on a napkin like she was planning a military op. When I asked what she was drawing, she looked up without flinching and said, "We're going to build her a gift, one she won't ever forget." The idea was simple in concept, diabolical in execution. We were going to create a fake outlet, not just any outlet. This one would be Karen's dream come true. Bigger, shinier, perfectly placed just within reach of her ATV's power cord. But this outlet wouldn't deliver electricity. No, it would deliver humiliation, spectacle, and poetic justice. We called it Project Zap Trap. Tom, my cousin from theater props, joined us for this one. When I explained the plan, his eyes lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. He started mumbling about timed fog machines, compressed air bursts, and biodegradable foam. I told him we didn't need to launch her into orbit, just embarrass her enough to make her stop. He grinned. No promises. For the next 3 days, we worked in shifts. Walt rigged a decoy power line that ran to a disguised control box hidden in a fake bush. Grandma D constructed the internal trigger using parts from an old electric grill and something she casually referred to as a little leftover Navy ingenuity. Tom added theatrical elements, a color-changing light pulse, a harmless sound pop, and foam cannons rigged to go off in sequence, designed to erupt from behind the outlet just as the cord made contact. The final touch, a fluorescent dye that would temporarily stain anything it touched in a glowing shade of electric blue. It was non-toxic and washable, but it would leave Karen looking like she had just wrestled a neon octopus. We installed the outlet on a low post near the side of my house, the same side Karen had used before. It looked real, too real. I even aged it a little, added some fake spiderwebs, and placed a dead plug nearby for authenticity. Then we all waited. Sparky the camera kept watch, and Rufus, sensing the tension, stood guard like a furry sentinel. On the fourth night, around midnight, the moment finally came. Karen appeared, moving like a shadow in the dim moonlight. She was dressed in what I can only describe as a tactical bathrobe, fluffy but with sneakers and a headlamp. She crept across my lawn, dragging her orange power cord like it was a lifeline. When she spotted the new outlet, she froze. Then she smiled, not a subtle smile, but a full-blown, I knew when smirk that almost made me laugh out loud. She didn't question it, didn't hesitate. She plugged in. The result was instant. First, a soft whir, then a hiss of compressed air. Foam shot up from behind the outlet, catching her in the chest. She stumbled back, shrieking. A blue burst of light pulsed from the fake socket, followed by a high-pitched whine like a sci-fi charging sound. Then came the dye, a glorious splash of electric blue mist that covered her from head to toe. She slipped on the foam, fell backward, and her headlamp landed in a bush, spinning wildly like a lighthouse of shame. The entire neighborhood, hiding behind windows, watching from phones, erupted into hushed laughter and quiet gasps. It was the kind of moment you never forget, one that becomes legend. Karen scrambled to her feet, soaked in foam and glowing like a malfunctioning avatar. She screamed something unintelligible, yanked the cord out of the outlet, and stomped back across the lawn, leaving blue footprints behind her. I had to bite my hand to keep from bursting into laughter. Rufus, tail wagging, barked once in approval. It was beautiful. The next morning, the footage had already gone viral on the Power Watch site. George uploaded a montage with dramatic music and slow motion. Linda added subtitles. Someone even put it to the beat of a techno remix. It was everything I had dreamed of and more. But we weren't finished yet. That afternoon, Karen came storming down the street, wrapped in a towel and still faintly tinted blue. She marched straight up to my front door and banged with both fists. I opened it, coffee in hand, and said, "Morning. You're going to regret this," she snapped, eyes wild. "I could sue you. That was sabotage. Assault. Some kind of neighborhood terrorism." "Karen," I said calmly, "you stepped onto my property again after being told not to, after damaging my lawn, my garden, and my car. You plugged something into a socket you didn't own, again. And this time, you got exactly what you asked for." She opened her mouth to argue, but just then, Grandma D appeared behind her with her phone out. "Already sent the footage to the HOA and the local news, just in case you try anything stupid," she said with a smirk. Karen spun around, stunned. Then, without another word, she turned and stomped off. As she passed George's house, he gave her a polite wave. Walt saluted from his porch. Linda threw confetti. Karen didn't look back. By sundown, the HOA had issued an official warning. Karen was fined for multiple violations, and the best part, she had to pay for the cleanup of my yard or risk further action. For the first time in years, the street felt peaceful. No more ATV revs, no more stolen electricity, no more glitter warfare. But as I sat on my porch that evening, sipping lemonade and watching Rufus nap in the grass, a tiny thought crept into my head. This wasn't the end. Karen wasn't the type to walk away quietly. And sure enough, a moving truck pulled up next door the very next morning. Only it wasn't for her. It was her cousin, Sharon. And if the look she gave me as she stepped out of the truck was any indication, this family had more than one fuse waiting to blow. The moment Sharon stepped out of that truck, I knew peace was going to be short-lived. She looked like Karen's clone, but meaner, taller, and holding what I swear was a Bluetooth-enabled clipboard. Her sunglasses were the size of salad plates, and her tank top read Queen K's bloodline. She didn't say a word to me as she walked past, but the smirk on her face said enough. She was here to finish what Karen had started, or worse, to pick up the torch and run with it like it was the opening ceremony of the Karen Olympics. Karen herself had gone radio silent after the glitter, foam, and HOA fines. She'd retreated behind closed blinds and suspiciously quiet evenings. Her ATV hadn't moved since the incident, now sitting idle in her garage like a monument to suburban warfare. But Sharon, she was not here to hide. She strutted around like she owned the block. Within 24 hours of moving in, she introduced herself to neighbors, not with a handshake, but with a business card that read, Sharon Templeton, lifestyle influencer, HOA consultant, energy enthusiast. I didn't even know energy enthusiasm was a thing. She immediately started talking about revitalizing the neighborhood vibe, which, from what I could tell, involved more glitter, more gossip, and a clipboard full of citations she clearly intended to start using like parking tickets. At first, I stayed calm. After all, the war had ended. Karen was quiet. The community was united. We had cameras, files, a support network. But something about Sharon made me uneasy. Maybe it was the way she eyed my solar panels like they were some kind of offense to nature, or the way she casually mentioned to George that she was into boundary redefinition. But the kicker came 3 days later when I found a letter taped to my door. It was from the HOA, only not the real HOA. It was a draft proposal Sharon had created, suggesting a reworking of neighborhood policies, including, but not limited to, the communal sharing of unused electricity. Her words, not mine. It was subtle, infuriatingly clever. She wasn't stealing power like Karen. She was trying to legalize it, frame it as some kind of progressive community sharing initiative, all under the guise of eco-consciousness. It was the same villain, just in a silkier disguise. I wasn't just dealing with chaos anymore. I was dealing with corporate-level caring. I gathered the crew again. George had already received a similar letter. Linda found Sharon measuring her yard with a laser tape and muttering about symmetrical harmony enforcement. Walt discovered his trash can had been moved precisely 8 inches forward. And Grandma D, well, she found Sharon snapping pictures of her gnome collection, possibly for some sort of unauthorized gnome census. We weren't going to let this happen, not again. The neighborhood had just reclaimed its peace, and now a new threat had arrived, dressed in athleisure wear and armed with buzzwords. So, we planned one final move. Not a prank, not a trap. This time, we were going full defense. We created a real, formal petition, signed by every household except the Templetons, to reinforce property boundaries, ban unsolicited electrical sharing, and limit non-HOA-endorsed initiatives. Then we backed it with evidence of past offenses, footage, witness statements, and HOA policy handbooks. Walt even printed everything in triplicate and used one of those old-school legal binders. We scheduled a special HOA meeting. Sharon showed up in a designer blazer and carried 3 tablets, probably thinking she was about to outmaneuver a bunch of retired veterans and backyard gardeners. What she walked into, though, was a unified front of furious suburbanites armed with paperwork and moral high ground. The meeting was glorious. Grandma D read the opening statement like it was a courtroom drama. Linda handed out color-coded timelines. George ran a slideshow. I just sat back and watched Sharon's expression evolve from smug to stunned to very quiet. When she tried to object, Walt stood up and calmly reminded her that as a recent resident, she couldn't make any community-wide proposals without a 6-month integration period. Then he slid a copy of the policy to her with a smile so smooth it could have ended a war. The vote passed unanimously. Sharon's proposal was thrown out. The power-sharing idea was officially banned. Karen, who had finally dared to show up wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, tried to raise a complaint about harassment, but was quickly silenced by the presentation of 15 separate video clips of her ATV stunts. The HOA warned her that any further infractions would result in serious penalties, including possible expulsion from the community. A week later, a new sign went up in front of the Templeton house, for sale. No open house, no explanation, just a quiet exodus. One morning, the ATV was gone. By afternoon, so were the glitter flamingos and solar-powered lawn speakers. Karen and Sharon had packed up their drama and driven off into the sunset, or possibly to another neighborhood unlucky enough to not know their names yet. The silence that followed was unlike anything we'd heard in months. It wasn't just quiet, it was peaceful. No midnight raves, no unauthorized landscaping, just the soft hum of sprinklers, the occasional bark of Rufus chasing squirrels, and neighbors exchanging smiles instead of suspicious glances. The Power Watch site was eventually archived, its mission complete. We left it up as a kind of time capsule, a digital reminder of the Great Karen War. I finally had the chance to replant my garden, real tomatoes this time. Rufus had his favorite sunspot back. I installed a small sign next to the Naudi-activated foam outlet. It read, "Protected by community spirit." People laughed when they saw it, but they understood. The message was clear. One evening, George hosted a barbecue to celebrate. Burgers sizzled, kids played with water balloons, and someone brought cupcakes topped with edible glitter, just the right kind. At one point, someone joked, "Think we'll ever get another Karen?" Grandma D didn't even look up from her corn on the cob. She just said, "Let him try." As the sun set and the string lights flickered on, I sat back in a lawn chair and watched my peaceful, drama-free street. No ATV revving, no glitter bombs, just laughter, music, and the distant memory of a woman who thought she could steal power forever and learn the hard way that the real power belonged to the people she underestimated.